Welcome to Driving Progress with TenMarks. Over the next short while, we're going to be focused on using TenMarks for data-driven instruction. What we're hoping is that you have already begun using TenMarks and possibly even participated in our prior professional development modules, Getting Started or Getting Personal. We're going to be diving in today to how you can use TenMarks to really strengthen the progress that you're making with your students. And by looking at key reports and key teacher intervention strategies, we think we can really help you get the most out of TenMarks, not just monitoring progress with your students, but really driving progress. So our plan for doing that today is we're going to start by reviewing the key TenMarks growth tools, including the hints, the videos, the amplifiers, and the feedback that you're getting. And then we're going to look closely at where you can find the information in the system that will quickly cue you to where your students are. Are they at mastery? Are they growing? Are they engaged and really benefiting from the system? After looking at a couple of the key details, we'll go through the sequences of what are teachers doing after looking at the reports and what practices really work the best in practice. And we're going to look at how do we encourage growth and acceleration and persistence with your whole class, students who are doing well. We're also going to look at how do you differentiate. So as you go more closely into working with small groups and trying to find out potentially why students might not be making the progress that you hope, what can we do there? And also, if students are really significantly behind, we're going to look at what do we do with struggling students and how might we support them using them. So we're going to start with a review of some of the key concepts behind the growth tools you have access to in TenMarks. When teachers share with us their results from especially the last year, which is probably one of the most exciting that we've seen, in many cases we're hearing stories where teachers have seen students or whole classes that began the year, in this case, 54% of the students began in this particular class below grade level. On their TenMarks initial diagnostic assessment, they were at 44.9% mastery on last year's standards. But over the course of the year, they were able to actually score in just incredible results. Some of the new Smarter Balanced results are coming back, and actually in this particular class that you're looking at, a sixth grade class, 64% of the students were actually above grade level at the end of the year. On TenMarks, they showed significant growth. And the big question is, what are teachers doing that really makes a difference in TenMarks? The 54% of the students who started the beginning of the year behind grade level, only 10% of them were still grade level in this particular class. And so we're going to look closely at what are those teachers telling us really can help with TenMarks. One of the things that is fundamental and is going to be part of most teachers' practice is trying to help make a shift from more of a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, really looking at all students being able to successfully master the most challenging math problems. And so the growth tools in TenMarks are really important to keep in mind. So usually TenMarks will sit right along your core instruction, and after you've taught a lesson, you'll assign a TenMarks assignment. Embedded in that assignment will be hints and videos and instant feedback, as well as an automatic intervention that we call an amplifier that occurs whenever students in our premium program are struggling and not initially scoring at 70% or more. In addition to these day-to-day, week-to-week assignments that are happening inside TenMarks, which fundamentally shifts the teachers into a mode of being able to really look at the data collected from the system that scores the work for the students and make decisions about that, we're also seeing teachers use TenMarks to actually assess what have students retained. So when TenMarks is used for assessments, usually that would be either for entire grade level diagnostics, where you look at the beginning or end of the year at an entire summative kind of assessment, or teachers are using TenMarks at the beginning or end of units for kind of progress monitoring. And when teachers have access to those assessment details, they're able to use TenMarks to support personalized work that comes from the recommendations that the system produces. And this is the sequence that we're really going to be making our data-driven instruction recommendations within. So the key part here is that we've probably looked at a number of assignments now. Hopefully you've worked with your students on at least a few assignments and a couple of assessments. And now we're going to be looking very closely at the role of data and insights. But we want to keep in mind that these cycles that we're going through really do get added on in phases. So most of the people who we're targeting these messages to are going to be approaching kind of the standard cycle after having done our first 10 marks units with assignments, after having done some assignments and assessments in your class. And we're going to be looking closely now at the student work that the system's reporting on. Just a quick note, a couple of the key tools in your assignments. We want to make sure students are actually engaging with the resources like hints and videos, that they are looking at the explanations closely when the system is giving them feedback. So one of the first things that you just want to remember is that sequence where students are not just seeing a problem like they might have seen it on a worksheet before, but they have that embedded support. We're also looking at the amplifiers. If you're unfamiliar thus far with what your students are experiencing in amplifiers, you may want to actually do one of these yourself. It's going to be a really important review that happens whenever students score under 70%. So they'll get not only some reminders of the key ideas, but they'll actually get a chance to work diagnostic problems inside of an amplifier. And what we're trying to get to is not just what students are perhaps not understanding, what's keeping them from mastery, but also giving a chance for the system to kind of practice with them and adapt to the problems that they're having. And so the amplifiers are going to include some practice problems that are diagnostic in nature. And all of this is something that you've probably been practicing in your classrooms, and we're going to build on this now with some of the key reporting and what have you. So now we're going to take a look at where exactly do we find in TenMarks the important student data that we're going to want to make decisions about and take action on. So one of the first things when you first log in, you'll always see a data dashboard. This dashboard is going to report for you who's improving. It's going to report for you a summary of who's at mastery. What you can see here on this list is that one of my students had improved and 2 students were at mastery. And it also highlights for me a little bit of the important engagement information. So if my students are scoring poorly, but they're not engaging with the resources like hints and videos, we're going to surface that up for you right on your dashboard, the very first page that you see when you log in. You're also going to want to keep in mind a few key ideas. What do we consider mastery? In TenMarks, 80% on an assignment should represent mastery of any particular track that students are working on. And we report that to you both in numbers, 80% or above, and also colors. So you'll see green, yellow, and red representing performance bands. 80 to 100 is green, 60 to 80 is yellow, and red would be anything under 60%. The other key thing that we're always going to be looking for when we're in the system reports is, are students progressing? When we talked about that important amplifier loop, the intervention that happens whenever students are doing that assignment, there's automatically going to be that amplifier every time. And then the students are going to be given an opportunity for a do-over. And what we'll always be looking for is, are the students improving substantially? We see significant data that students can immediately after that automatic amplifier, they can improve 15, 20, 30%. And so on your assignment detail report, that's a great place to go looking for growth. I'll show you this in the live system in just a moment. Finally, we're not able to just report on what students are doing, but also looking at why. This is one of my favorite reports that we're looking at here. This is the assignment detail report, and it's showing me two really important things. It's showing me at the top of my page a summary of how long students are spending on the assignment and what number of hints and videos are they using. We're also reporting on what are the most common mistakes. And this is really key because the problems in TenMarks are designed to actually be diagnostic in nature. So the incorrect answer choices actually are surfaced up to you, the teacher. And if you look at the assignment after the students have completed it, not only will you see the immediate scores, you'll always see the top 3 most common mistakes. And as you'll see in a moment, you can click to see which students are making those particular mistakes. So the first thing that happens when I log in on TenMarks is that I'll be presented with an option to go either to prepare and deliver lessons in the TenMarks Math Teach side of my account or to create assignments. This is always where I'm going to go to look at student work. So when I click to go into the assignment area, you'll notice that the dashboard is the very first thing that I see. And I love that it is surfacing for me all of the important things related to growth and mastery and also engagement. So for instance, if a student didn't have any work assigned by me, it would highlight their name. In this case, I'm looking here at 2 of my students had a do-over related to an amplifier, and in one case, Duke was improving. So I love just logging right into the dashboard and seeing this important information. It's very key to be looking at students as well who may not be successfully engaging with the resources that are available to them. So the second thing that we're seeing is that there's a student who has not been using hints and videos, and I'm going to look more closely at his work. But when I click here into the reports, that is a great place to start to look at what your students are doing in your whole class. So when I click on reports, what you're going to see is that it's broken into assignments, jam session, and assessments, which are the 3 types of work that students do in TenMarks. I also have a usage report, which we'll talk about in a moment. That's a great place to look at time spent and overall effort. And then the report cards is where you would look at individual reports that can be printed for students. But the default here, I'm looking at the performance on class assignments, and this is going to show me for any of the work that I have assigned to my whole class. So everyone in the class is expected to do that. It would be reported on in summary fashion here. You can actually do some filtering. So if I wanted to see the actual scores, I can click and you'll notice that that turns from just the green, yellow, red to the actual scores. But what I really like is that I can click and look more closely by toggling into the report, the assignment detail report, which I'll do in just a moment, or I can click and export and get all of the student data exported as a spreadsheet. But let's look here at the assignment detail report. This is what I was showing you that gives you so much information in one place. It's going to show me how many of my students have finished, what are their average scores, how much time are they spending, and what kind of access are they making to the TenMarks resources such as hints and videos. And then the premium metrics, if you actually do have the premium program, this will show you the information about amplifiers, how many students have completed their do-overs, and what percent are they increasing their scores after doing that. So I love top 3 most common mistakes. So as my students have gone and engaged with TenMarks to do their assigned work, when they're making incorrect or partially correct answer choices, it's going to be reported to me here. And if I click on the number right next to the mistake, it will actually show me which students are making that particular mistake. So it's very actionable for me. If I only had a few minutes before I jumped into the next topic, that would be a great place for me to know what to do next. As I scroll down, you're seeing that this shows me all of my student details. And it's very important that I'm looking here, not just at the green, yellow, red, but I'm looking here for improvement. And you see Duke scored very, very poorly on his first assignment, but then as he moved through the amplifier process where he got 3 out of 5 of the practice problems correct, he then was able to get 70% correct. And if I ever want to see exactly what answer choices and questions he was receiving, if I click here on the number next to his name, that will pull up the exact set of problems that the student has done. And this is important because remember, TenMarks is always pulling from somewhere on the order of like 60, 70, 80, 90 questions per topic. And so if you ever want to see what exactly did they experience as question 1, question 2, etc., you can see it here. And you can see it for their assignment itself, for their do-over, and you can see, how many questions were partially correct. You can even see the same explanations that were shown to the student if they were getting it incorrect. So it's a really wonderful resource to be able to click on the number itself and have it hyperlink to the actual score. We've really been focusing here in the reports and the assignments for the students' assigned work. I also love the fact that I can report on jam session and assessments from this area. I also love that I can get information about how my students are doing, not just on the whole class assignments, but on their personal work. So these are a few of the places that you can go for your reporting on TenMarks. And you're seeing here that jam session is fully reported for you. Your assessments work in a very similar manner. And one of the things I really love to do when I'm just kind of keeping track of the assigned work is clicking on the usage report will actually show me how much time is being spent. And the usage report is something that shows me all of my work in one place, my assignments, my jam session, and my assessments. And it will show me my total problems completed, as well as how much time is spent. It doesn't actually give me as much information about performance, but I'm getting plenty of that in the track and standard level reports. I think you can see now that as we're looking closely at what are the students doing on TenMarks and what is the system telling us, the next major topic is what can we do to really optimize what the system is doing and what we're doing. And this is going to be just a few recommendations coming from our collected interviews and feedbacks from some of the teachers who are really working the best with TenMarks. So the first thing I'm going to introduce is kind of a decision tree. So this is a sample kind of process flow. And if you begin here at the top, one of the basic questions you're always going to want to be asking yourself is, are my students in the green? Are they at 80% or above? If the answer to that question is yes, then we're probably ready to move on. So the practice on TenMarks has been a success. They've worked through the challenging topics and they're ready for additional content at the next level. You can either just move your whole class into the next topic, or if you have just a few students who are at mastery, you can also use individual work to give them additional acceleration on the next in the progression of topics. But we're going to look a little bit closely at what happens if the answer is no. So if my students are under 80%, then they're always going to get that amplifier. So the amplifier will kick in at 70% or below, and on a 10-question assignment, that generally would be answering 7 questions or less correctly. And then what we're going to be doing is just kind of checking in to see, does that amplifier and do-over loop increase the student's success? So you're going to want to pay close attention to making sure that you're looking at the time that students are spending and the engagement and the use of that amplifier. Is it helping drive improvement? If the answer to that is yes, then you've probably closed some of the gap and maybe your students are now over 80% after their do-over. And then again, you just start moving on. But if your students are not growing with that automatic amplifier, then we're going to try and look even more closely at what strategies you can use to go more closely into kind of a one-on-one or small group session with your students to really try and increase their engagement and growth and ultimately the mastery of these topics. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those 3 strategies now. So the first thing I want to do is just re-emphasize what's happening through the system. So in the first set of issues, Tier 1, this is my whole class, anytime students are working the problems, I just want to remind you they always have those hints and videos. They always have the instant feedback, and if they score under 70%, they'll get that reteaching module, the amplifier. That always happens. With the next level of students, I want to remind you that you're always going to be getting the opportunity for what we call one-click differentiation. So if the students score under 60% on an assignment, you'll have an opportunity to accept recommendations on prerequisite topics, or anytime you do an assessment, you will also get opportunities to accept recommendations to have students work on review or practice topics that actually go back and strengthen the number of problems that they're doing on prerequisite topics. This is what always happens when we're talking about the one-click differentiation or the assessment recommendations. Finally, we're going to look at a couple of system tools and how we use those, because you're always going to be able to see in the TenMarks tool what we call concept trajectories. So looking closely at what the system can tell you about the standards themselves and what flexibility you have in perhaps limiting some of the question types that students are seeing when they're working on the standards, we think that you can actually use the system to go even further back into kind of a review of the review topics. So this kind of leads me to our 3 core recommendations. So the first intervention strategy I want to just mention is that you're going to want to be looking closely at your assignment detail reports to make sure that you're aware of how much time your students are spending and how engaged they are with the resources. One of my favorite teachers was telling me when she looks at the teacher reports, if her students haven't spent enough time, boom, she reassigns it. If they're scoring poorly and they're not using hints and videos, she reassigns. If the students are not really understanding that these tools are there to help them grow, she needs them to really engage. And that's a very successful strategy that we hear again and again, that you want to go slow to go fast. The second intervention strategy is going to be looking at, are the students consistently under 60%? And that's where we'll want to emphasize the use of one-click differentiation and accepting the review topics for the recommendations that the system gives you. And then finally, we're going to look closely at what if the students are under 60% on the lower level standards that you've just assigned them. And we're going to then look at modifying personal work. So let's look closely at the first recommendation, reminding you just that the students always have these hints and videos, but in many cases, students are going to start in TenMarks the way that they've always done their math problems. They're just trying to race through and get done. So we're going to suggest that you look closely at the use of those resources, and I'll show you in just a moment where you go to find that data so that you can just coach them to be more engaged with those resources. The second thing is to make sure that you're accepting those differentiation recommendations that come from either the assignments or the assessments. What this will typically do is it's going to give the students a set of individual assignments that will, in the most case, if you've been working on 4 NF1 and not doing well, scoring under 60%, then the system is going to make a recommendation that you go back to those 3 prerequisites that are required for success in that. And that's going to be something that you're going to want to really take advantage of. Finally, when you look at the students who neither of those two strategies work for, that's probably going to be because the student is really lacking not just content from last year, but probably from multiple years. The first intervention strategy I was mentioning is just taking a very simple look at whether the students are in fact using those resources. The easiest place to find that is here on the assignment detail report, where you can take a look at how many hints or videos and how much time the students have used. And what I've always told my students is, look, it's never going to be okay for you to score 30% and not have used hints or videos. In this case, I was very pleased to see Duke having engaged with the amplifier and gotten to a higher level, but he still didn't use any of those hints and videos. So that's probably a red flag that we would want to make sure that we're taking some action on. So what I might do is I might click on Duke's name and simply take the action to reassign this particular topic. And that would be my intervention strategy for Duke, is that he's still under 70%, but now he has a chance to do more work on that same topic. And one of the primary reasons for me taking that action is that I wasn't impressed by his amount of time or use of videos. Now, this is sample data, so this is extraordinarily low. Certainly, if you are seeing students in only 1 minute, you'd want to take some action there. The next thing that I wanted to review is just that one-click differentiation. So for example, here from this same screen, you'll notice that I have this one-click differentiation. And so what happens is when my students score under 60%, like in the case of Duke here, I have the chance to just keep a really close eye on that. The system is going to automatically surface up for me if students have review recommendations. And so if I click here, this will show me if they've done poorly on 4MBT1, under 60%. And if I click on this link here, it will take me to these exact prerequisite standards. What I'm seeing here is that I actually have more students in this group that are performing well. So I can, with this one click, just add the challenge work to their personal playlist. And what that does then is it will give them a list of work to do that will take them back. So for instance, the work that we're seeing here is the personal work for Duke. And you'll notice that he is working on some of the earlier topics and standards. And so this is hopefully going to help him get that practice that he needs. If he isn't initially successful, he'll go through that same loop with the amplifier, and then he'll be presented the opportunity again to work his way back up to the 4MBT1. Let's take a look now at the students that maybe would be individually scoring well below 60%. What we were saying is that the first strategy that we might look at is trying to look specifically at those trajectories. So let's take a look at that together. When I go here to my system, I actually have the opportunity to go, I can click on my name and I can actually pop over to TenMarks Math Teach. And this is a free side of my account that I have several different topics that I can explore. So I love this little magnifying glass here. And what we were seeing is that Duke was having trouble on 4MBT1. So I can actually click on that particular standard. And anywhere that I see the standard here, I can actually look closely at the learning objectives themselves and get a concept trajectory. So here are the 3 learning objectives for 4MBT1. And I can quickly and easily see that 2MBT1 and 3MBT3 and 4OA1 are the standards that Duke needs to understand before he's really expected to be successful with 4MBT1. That's the same list of standards that we would have been accepting recommendations on from the one-click differentiation. But in this case, what I'm suggesting here is that maybe what you would want to do is just choose one of those standards, like 3 MBT 3, let's say, and then you go back to TenMarks Math, and you can actually pull up and isolate that particular standard. And as I switch over here, I just want to show you one of the newer features that allows you to make an assignment on that particular standard. I go to curriculum and I can choose the standard. I can actually go back to my grade 3 and I'm going to look at that 3 MBT standard. And when I click to assign here, one of the things I can do is I can actually look at the question types. This is the advanced feature. And if I wanted to, I could actually choose just certain ones of those questions. So when I'm looking at this, I've just double clicked in there, and now I have an option to either use this question type or not in the assignment that I'm doing. So I can really isolate the standards that my students are working on and get this really focused for Duke, who's having trouble on those standards. So what we're talking about here is first look at the concept trajectory. Then if I wanted to, I can actually say I don't want to use that and I don't want to use that. So when I do this new assignment, the questions that he's going to get are going to be just limited to those particular ones that I had selected. So he's going to see the visual models and a little bit of the 10 base T blocks. So that looks good. And so that is a really easy way for me to then modify for Duke what he's working on and try and isolate those standards. Finally, you'll notice in TenMarks Math Teach that you now have in TenMarks Math for back to school, you also have the jam sessions listed. And you can quickly and easily see the Common Core standards that the jam session covers. And if you don't see the level here in your current grade level, it's very easy for you to go and create actually a second class for a particular student who might need jam session content from another level. So I can just click add a class, and I could even select the grade 3 or the grade 2 level and maybe just put Duke in that class. And then when I make that class, I can actually then add my existing TenMarks students just by cutting and pasting his name. And then the result of that would be that I would have fluency practice opportunities for that student at the lower grade level. I know this is a lot, but I hope that these suggestions have been helpful to you. Here is kind of a summary of the recommendations that we've been making, really kind of flipping this and saying, for your students who are struggling the most, what might you be able to do? And what we're really trying to do is use the deeper progression tools to fill the gaps and build fluency and help the students work their way back up based on personalizing the work for them. With your small groups, it's going to be pretty easy to use the one-click differentiation and those assessment recommendations. And for all students, we want you focusing on engaging with those hints and videos and feedback, making sure that they always read the explanation if they get a problem wrong, and then growing through the use of the amplifiers. Finally, combine these things with the things that you do well and with the offline tools and reflections that your students are doing, and have them goal setting as you always would, so that TenMarks just becomes one very powerful way of using the online tools in combination with what you do offline to drive students to their best success. And always keep in mind balance. So we're probably going to be doing some whole class activities and some personal activities on TenMarks. We give you the flexibility of being able to do both in the system, but hopefully this has helped you to really, understand some of the key opportunities for driving progress. And if you have further questions, find us at help.tenmarks.com. And thank you so much for being with us here today.